Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today I want to talk about the race selection screen. Yes, I know it sounds like a weird thing, but you see, there are 7 slots in that area which remain unused, which is a strange thing at the very least. Because if they had no intention of doing other races, we already know that there's at least one more to come, obviously. The design would feel a tad incomplete, wouldn't it? Now, I believe that more race packs will come post-Chaos Dwarfs because it makes a lot of sense. Race packs make a lot of money and, well, we know that Games Workshop is trying to expand the Warhammer Fantasy IP, now known as Warhammer the Old World, so you know, this is perfect cross-promotion. What I want to do in this video is have a discussion and look at the possible races that could fit here. At least that's by my reasoning. You guys might have different or contrasting views. But yeah, let's jump right in. Let's have a bit of a discussion and let's see what you guys think. So the first one would obviously be the Chaos Dwarfs. It's the race that we're already expecting to be the next DLC for the Total War Warhammer series. These are known as the Dawi Tsar, a group of dwarfs which have found themselves under chaotic embrace by their god Hashut. These aren't like the regular dwarfs that you're already used to, but rather a lot more different in a sense. You see, they use heavy cavalry, they even use hobgoblin slaves, they've got access to a lot of demonic firepower, some magic. It's like dwarves, but a lot scarier. Now, there's really not too much to talk about it if and when, because we know it's a when. So many things have been leaked for them, and there's been so many hints in-game, that really it's only a matter of time. Seeing as we've just recently had the Champions of Chaos DLC, it can be any time from now to, what, let's just say 6 months in total? As it looks like we are getting patch 2.2 rather than moving on to 3.0, so yeah, we're gonna have to wait a small while. But yeah, it's Chaos Dwarfs. For the next, it's likely to be the Dogs of War or Southern Realms. The names are pretty interchangeable there. But after the Chaos Dwarfs, the Dogs of War are the last remaining army book, which is weird to say. So many races have been added in, and hell, there's even some that aren't linked to an army book. So it's just absolutely insane. But essentially what happens with the Dogs of War is that they are a mix of different races and factions. Yes, they're mostly mercenaries, but the main basis is that they're based in the Southern Realms, Estalia, Talia, the Border Princes, and Araby. And I've speculated about this in the past, so this would be following the Dogs of War army book, right, which has units from every different place, and it's also got access to units from each of the respective countries. And then possibly in the future, like Champions of Chaos has done, we'll get some expanded DLC, which will then flesh out the countries respectively. So it wouldn't be like their own dedicated races. We wouldn't see Estalia, Talia, the Border Princes, and Araby as their own specific races in this list, but like the Champions of Chaos. So when you go onto the Warriors of Chaos section, you click on, say, for example, Valkyria, and you've got a dedicated Valkyria faction. So here you would get, like, maybe Lorenzo Lupo, and then get a dedicated Talian faction. I mean, what better to do a Champions of Chaos style DLC than just expanding on the Dogs of War to have, well, another big style DLC, which will likely use a lot of the same assets, but just have different skins, essentially, and that's what we expect from human nations, right? Animations would be reused from all the other humans, but then add a little bit more flavor through everything else, right? Just a unique skin, some unique voice lines, obviously unique mechanics, and there you go. Next would be Nagash, and hear me out. Before anything though, I'm not going in any particular order, it just kind of makes sense to just go down with the ones that are more concrete. Now you might be wondering why Nagash would be considered his own race, and really it makes sense. You see, the legions of Nagash in the end times, whether in lore or in the actual tabletop, was a mix between Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts, and also Vampire Coast if you look towards the lore, which they didn't have an army on tabletop, that's why. So it kind of makes sense for him to be able to have his own dedicated race slot in a sense, because that would be like the Demons of Chaos are. For Daniel has his own unique faction, which has access to all the monogod demons, and well, it just makes sense for Nagash to have the same thing. So Nagash would be his own dedicated race slot, where he would be maybe the only legendary lord with his own very unique mechanics. There could be other legendary lords too, like for example the Nameless, who was hinted, and a few other Mortarchs too. But Nagash, if he gets added in, which is almost fairly certain given the amount of times he's been mentioned, and well, let's be honest, Nagash as a DLC would sell very, very heavily. he deserves his own race slot where he can have his own tech trees, where he can have his own unique mechanics, but nothing like what we've seen before, something very stylized for the Lord of Undeath. So he'd make use of a lot of stuff that's already available and maybe have a few extra units, but the main focus should be around him and making his campaign extremely unique. Next would be the Kingdoms of Ind. So the Kingdoms of Ind themselves are already in-game. The only thing is that the area, the landmass, is not traversable. However, a blog from a few months ago did kind of confirm that we are going to go to those areas eventually. Likely they're going to be opened up for minor factions originally, just to kind of flesh out the areas, add in some people, minor factions just for people to fight. But it's also very likely that after that we could see a proper race pack. Why, you may ask? Well, Int, for some reason, does get a decent amount of lore updates as we go through Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and they do have a decent amount of lore in general. It's a human nation with many minor kingdoms. We know that Tiger Men also exist through that area. They're a more good-aligned type of beastmen. Well, neutral, I'd say, more than anything. It's the land of 1,000 gods, so it would obviously draw from Indian mythology and religion and folklore. Hell, we even know that the Skaven learned how to make doom rockets from the people of Ind as they observed them, because the people of Ind had some sort of very strong weaponry in that form. And while yes, this is another human nation, which many people might not be too keen on, keep in mind that I don't imagine Ind to be fully human, whereas I imagine them to be a mixture of human and, you know, kind of beastmen-like characters. Maybe the gods would be living gods themselves, just to add a little bit more flavor. So rather than a human legendary lord, it's an avatar of one of their gods, very similar to that on how Orion and Ariel work for the Wood Elves. They aren't physical gods, they are more avatars. Next would be the hinterlands of Koresh, which would have the Snake Men of Koresh and the Blood Naga. Like the Kingdoms of Ind, these territories are likely to be opened up eventually. I mean, they're already in the game files and they're absolutely massive. It's one of the biggest unused landmasses that we've ever seen for Total War at the moment, and really what we have here is, from older lore, they're a chaotic faction of snake people. They feast on blood, they own pretty much all the hinterlands of Koresh itself, they enslave the local human populace, but we don't know too much of what's going to happen in the future. What we do know is that the Dreadmore has recently been moved to be a Koreshi unit, and hell, we even have a look at a Koreshi character, but it's for Blood Bowl, it's an alternate universe. So like the Kingdoms of Ind, well, they're getting lore updates. It might be quite sporadic, but then again, I don't imagine Ind and Koresh getting confirmed for DLC as race packs anytime soon. Like, if we're going to start seeing this might be 2, 3, maybe even 4 years down the line. Now we're going to move on to Nippon. Now, Nippon is a very strange thing, because right now they don't feature in the Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires map. But through concept art, we know that they might have at least planned it, or they're planning for the future, because map expansions are indeed possible. Nippon is feudal Japan, that's pretty much it. The only problem is that early lore was kind of bad. Let's just be very honest, early lore was very, very bad. However, we do know that they remain in canon, as there were hints about it through an interview with Andy Hall in the Lorebeards podcast. He just outright refused to name Nippon. But he did mention that there were human nations to the east, and, well, that would be Nippon. Anyways, we do know that there were loads of plans for Nippon in the past. In fact, there was interviews with Graham Davis recently, who is one of the OGs for the Warhammer Fantasy universe, where he mentions that there were plans, like, for example, there would be undead samurai and, well, a few other things, so there could have even been a different bloodline over there. And you have to keep in mind, through a lot of interviews with former GW staff, that Games Workshop did actually prepare a lot of ideas for stuff in the East, they just never got round to it. It's something that was very common, and still is very common with Games Workshop as a whole. They'll plan out ideas, but then, oh no, let's focus Space Marines, let's focus Stormcasts. It's just a common thing. And I honestly do think that Games Workshop and CA probably do have plans for Nippon, and even Ind and Koresh, but they thought, well, we're not going to work on the map for Nippon just yet, in case the series doesn't do well, whereas Koresh and Ind can stay either fogged up or just filled out with minor factions should it be needed. And then if the demand is there, because obviously the focus is usually quite a lot of demand, then they can say, okay, now it's time for a race pack, now it's time for this. So yeah, I honestly think Nippon is going to come in the future, but might be quite late into the series. They did say that it was going to be a series that's going to be supported for many, many years, that Warhammer was going to get a lot of content. They just have to put their money where their mouth is. For the final slot, this is where I draw a blank. Yeah, I know. You see, if Champions of Chaos didn't exist, I could say this is where they split up the Dogs of War stuff, but yeah, they could easily be as sub-races. I know a lot of people want the Hobgoblin Incarnates, but I easily think that they could be an extra DLC for the Chaos Dwarfs. Again, using the Champions of Chaos format, just in a much smaller scale, but yeah, we're expecting Hobgoblins with the Chaos Dwarfs in the vanilla roster that they're going to get in the future, because they were part of their individual army books anyway, and then a further DLC just to flesh out the Hobgoblins, and that would then be a Hobgoblin faction. So it doesn't need their own race pack, they don't need to be a unique and separate thing. And there's not really any other big nations that we're missing. Yes, Albion is missing, the Amazons are missing, but they could easily fall into Dogs of War. Lumbria, which we know next to nothing about, and the Lost Isles of Elephas are also missing, but again, we don't know if that could be a possibility, or if something is planned for them. That is something very, very strange. I don't know. This is something where I really don't know. Maybe they have something planned, maybe they're just making it up as they go along. This is a very Games Workshop thing to do, and possibly Creative Assembly too, but I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. And yes, it could be fishmen. Yes, I'm just gonna say it now. Fishmen are a thing, and I know if I don't say it, people will get angry. But I don't know how a fishman army could, be viable, or... Well, we know next to nothing about the fishmen in lore as it stands. There's a little bit of things here and there, but maybe. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about these races. Let me know what you guys think about the 7th, what you think it could be in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. I'm rather curious to see what you guys think. I think this is a really realistic thing that we could ask for and see in the future. It's just, we're going to have to wait and see. There's years for this series. There's going to be many years, hopefully. Let's just hope that Creative Assembly don't do a whole, yes, you're getting Northern Lords, but then no. Yeah?